Namaste. We'll now commence the new series Heart to Heart Volume 2, which covers talks and questions and answers from the proceedings of the seminars of Sahaj Marg held during September-October 1987 at France, Madagascar, Switzerland by Pujya Shri Ji Maharaj. We commence this series with the talk at Bonasque, France on September 1st, 1987, titled Forget Both. What I am going to say is not a commentary on what these people have just said now. It is in a general way. You know, in the Bible, we have the Genesis, how things begin. So we always have the original beginning and the force or the power which begins. That beginning is supposed to be God. So in that sense, everything is begun by God Himself. In another sense, we begin so many things and we say we are beginning things. I don't think either is wrong, because without God nothing could begin. We would not be here too. So He is called the ultimate cause, you see, He, God. But in India, we find this rather disturbing fact that if you ascribe all responsibility for everything only to God, human beings become incompetent. Of course, somebody may say this is not so in Europe, it is an Indian view. Of course, because it is peculiarly Indian, this attitude that since God is responsible for everything, He created me, He will look after me, He will feed me, alt this you see. So they just go to sleep under a tree and wait for something to happen. I personally believe that if India is in such a sorry condition today, it is because of this attitude. So that can be a very self-defeating attitude if we do not do what we have to do also. The West has always called India a fatalistic nation, that is, they believe in fate. It is not quite correct, because even if I believe in fate, I still do something. We should still do something. I can believe in fate and still continue my life, but the West has not interpreted the Indian attitude or the Indian psyche correctly in this matter. We have had very great Western scholars who have tried to probe the Indian mind, but even at a very superficial level. They were so fascinated by what they found that they did not go deeper. This applies to all the great Western scholars, especially the Indologists, the philosophers, the psychologists, unfortunately few of them. But for some reason, even today you find books on so many subjects which deal only with the Western mind, forgetting the fact that if any mental development arose at all, it arose in the East. So if you want to really know why the mind functions, the human mind functions in such and such ways, I believe the origins must be sought in the Eastern mind and not in the Western mind. I am not a scholar. This is my personal opinion. Of course, many here may disagree with this, but your disagreement will only prove that the Western mind is very superficial. It is as if you can claim that a house is built without a foundation. It is a well-known fact of scientific study that the origins of life itself are sought in subjects like paleontology, for instance, the study of fossils, and we go back to mollusks and amoebas and tadpoles and things like that to find out how human beings have evolved. So you see, the reason for the present is always in the past. I am here because my parents were there before me, and they were before because their parents were there. In fact, I believe the first idea of a God came like this. I personally believe that there has been two streams of thought which contributed to the creation of a God in the human mind. One by this research of going backwards. I have a father, he had a father, he had a father, and so on. So there must be the ultimate father. What I am going to say is not a commentary on who is God. So that leads us to some sort of idea that there was an original cause. The second cause or second stream of thought which led to an idea of God were the enormous and most powerful and terrifying forces of nature that man faced when he came out into human life. Rain, lightning, thunder, tides in the ocean, storms, and of course the predatory animals. And therefore, if you go back to the ideas of worship, you always find in every society on earth that they started with the worship of the fire god, the lightning god, the thunder god, the rain god, the wind god. And then as the human mind developed, they started bringing these forces together into some sort of synthesis. For instance, bringing thunder and lightning into one god, then adding rain god to him, then wind god. Finally, we end up with one god who controls all the powers of nature. So you find that monotheism has resulted from some polytheistic ideas of the past when the mind went outside to face nature and life. But when you go back in time, reverse yourself in time, look into the source of things, you find you end up with the same monotheism, that there must have been one Father who created all of us. So I would suggest that both are ways of research, one to discover the cause of things, the other to help us to overcome the powers of nature and exist comfortably and to allow us to continue to exist here. Perhaps it would not be wrong if we say one is the way of philosophy, the other the way of science. And it is true that some societies have favored the one while other societies have favored the other. Which is the better way? Well, philosophy has the answer, not science, because if you want at one stroke to finish this question forever, philosophy says it is the simpler way, because we go inwards by eliminating things one by one, whereas science goes into the vast universe which it is never going to complete researching. Therefore, philosophy says, if you follow my way, it is easier, quicker, simpler. Whereas if you go out into the vast universe, you are never going to be able to see anything there, because no human being, and not even millions of generations of human beings, are going to have the time sufficient to study the universe completely. This wisdom guided the Eastern societies to go inwards into philosophical research, which really meant research into yourself, because it would be an absurdity to see God in trees and stones and birds and beautiful things. So if each human being had to dwell inwards, he or she could only dwell into himself or herself, and in this way evolved the science of yoga meditation. Science dissects essentially, so the whole is being broken up into its parts, the parts into the subparts, the subparts into the sub-subparts, and it is like a child which buys a radio set and opens the whole thing up into its parts and does not know how to put the whole thing together again. Now, here I want to make a cautionary remark about science. Even few scientists remember, even the most elevated, enlightened of them know, and more surprisingly, even those who wrote about science from a very original research point of view, remember this fact, that most of what science has said is not final. They are hypothetical in the sense that they are hypotheses not yet proved in fact. In science, there is nothing final. Today's truth is tomorrow's falsity, because something else has been discovered in the meantime. Now, when we use our intelligence, our willpower, our bodies to work for ourselves and not for Him, we are like the hands trying to be independent of the body, and they may have to be amputated if the disease has gone too far. In spiritual language, such an amputation of the self from the divine existence is called hell, I think. I cannot think of any other hell. The severance of the part from the whole is hell for me. When you put a dog out of your house and close the doors, it's running like mad round and round house, barking and scratching at the doors to be allowed to come back inside. The dog wants to be part of your existence all over again. It is the same with children. They may like to go out to play, but they want to come back inside. It is the same with us, husbands, wives, everybody. We may go out, but we have to come back. The going out is science. I want a little fun. I want to look at the outside world. I want to go to the beach, all sense oriented or intellect oriented. I want to come back to my house. This is safety, security, love oriented. It is safety, security, and love which brings us back. So essentially, knowledge takes us outside, love brings us inside. Sahaj Marg strikes a wonderful balance here too. The principle of the two wings of the bird, love supported by intellectual balance or whatever it is, science supported by philosophy, material life supported by spiritual life. And we know this is true because we have got two legs, two hands, two eyes. Without binocular vision, we could not pinpoint the source or the position of anything that we see. So similarly, I think the two eyes of the soul perhaps are the philosophic eye and the scientific eye. And when we close one and look only through the other, we lose a very vital part of vision. We can see what is it, but we cannot see where it is. Try placing a glass of water on the table and close one eye and reach out of it. Reach for it. You cannot do it. So we need the two things. Therefore, Master says, don't neglect the material life for the spiritual life. This message is for the East. And when he comes to the West, he says, don't neglect the spiritual life for the material life. This is for the West. If you look at it very sensibly and very directly, don't neglect this for that. Keep both, balance both are necessary. So this is the message. Therefore, we should not think this is an Eastern way or that is a Western way. That is a very superficial way of looking at it. It is like children playing with a coin and tossing it and saying heads or tails. And gambler comes and says heads I win, tails you lose. So these are two sides to everything. In one society, I talk about the same thing in one way. In another society, I talk about the other thing from the other's point of view. The other coin, other side of the coin. This problem has arisen because of opposing viewpoints, considering so many questions, even morality. Oh, this is Eastern philosophy. This is Eastern morality. This is Western morality. How can morality be Eastern or Western? It is as absurd as saying that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. It is a convenience that for our ability to move around, we must have directions, latitudes, longitudes. It is for navigation. When the British ruled the world, they put the Greenwich meridian through England 0 degrees longitude. So for them, everything was east and or west of themselves. But suppose Germany had ruled the world, it could have been through Frankfurt, or if China had ruled the world, it could have been through Canton or Peking. So where is the true 0 degrees longitude? It is where you put it. Now I am sitting to the east of you. You are sitting to the west of me. Who is where? So you see, these are conveniences which we have created to help ourselves to move around in time and space. So to say that the sun rises in the east is stupid. It rises in an east which we have stipulated to be the east. If tomorrow the new government comes and says, now the whole direction shall be reversed, this shall be called west and this east, then the sun will rise in the west and set in the east. If you go a little deeper into the question, it is even more stupid because the sun does not rise or set. It is the earth which moves around it. So what is the reality? We perceive this as reality because we have been taught by convention to perceive it as such. Everything that we perceive, everything that we know is conventional knowledge, conventional wisdom, not real. I have been taught to look at reality or one facet of reality in this way and to accept it as the real thing. Another society has been taught in a different way. Even ideas of beauty differ. What is beautiful in East is not necessarily beautiful in the West. The cleanliness of the East is not the cleanliness of West. The wisdom of the East is not the wisdom of the West. There in the East you find everything internal. Here you find everything external. It does not mean one is right and one is wrong. The only true attitude to all this is one has gone to one extreme, the other has gone to other extreme. Both are suffering. So that is the importance of Babuji's teaching. Bring balance to both. For the East, preserve your internal beauty, but without neglecting your external beauty too. Keep your inner cleanliness, but don't make your outside a mess as we do in India all the time. Environmental cleanliness is as necessary as inner cleanliness. For the West, it is the opposite message. It's not enough to be externally clean, environmentally clean. Clean your inside too. It's not enough to be externally beautiful. The surface of your body is beautiful. Make the inside beautiful too. So this is the problem, that any teaching can be considered to be this or this depending on where it is spoken, which only presents the problem in a new light, that knowledge itself is relative. One man is more wise than another. It is a comparison. It's a relative value. Therefore, Babuji's greatest statement is that God has no knowledge, no mind. Because if God had knowledge, you could always argue there in something more which has more knowledge. It would be like the universe, which is ever expanding. A universe cannot have a size. It can only have an approximate size as of this moment in time. So we would have an idea of an expanding God or gods who are each one bigger than the other, and then we would reverse ourselves back in time to the Platonic ideas, the Greek ideas, the Roman ideas, the Nordic ideas of gods. Who is the highest of them all? So then you come back to the idea of parliament of gods, with somebody presiding over all the other lesser gods, then who go back to the old polytheistic conceptions. But my master went inwards, from the wisest to the less wise, to the foolish, to the stupid, to the utterly foolish, to the nothing. And from that nothing comes all this. Stupidity comes from it. Wisdom comes from it. The highest knowledge comes from it. And now this is a fascinating thing, that we find when we go into ourselves as philosophers or yogis. We find nothingness from which everything comes. From that nothing, everything comes. The base of everything is nothingness. And surprisingly, science finds the same thing when it goes into matter. Molecules, atoms, nuclei, then subatomic particles, then these funny things they call quarks and whatnot. Now, if the scientists had been sensible, they would have said, beyond that is nothing. From that nothing, everything in matter also comes. And there would have been a grand and wonderful synthesis of science and yoga. But unfortunately, science wants to find further particles which are making up these particles. Science is always looking for something and finds something, and when you find something, it cannot be God. This is what the ancient Vedic statement says, neti neti. Not this, not this. Because if you can say it is this, it is not it. Heisenberg again, if you know the velocity, you do not know the position, and if you know where it is, you cannot know its velocity. Philosophy, yoga says, it has neither velocity nor position. Why are you looking for it? Because God cannot have a position in space, nor can He be moving from somewhere to somewhere to have a velocity in time. So you see this problem all over again. Therefore, the Eastern mysticism, the great minds of the East went into that nothingness, which being nothingness could have no position in space nor motion in time, but which each individual finds in the center of his heart when he meditates, and when they research further, they found it is in the center of everything in the universe. Therefore, they came to this grand concept. It is everywhere without being nowhere. It is nothing, but from it everything comes. All these opposites, fascinating concepts. Whereas the scientists with their obsession with giving a location to everything, are still trying to find God in particles, subparticles, sub-subparticles. So this is the tragedy of science and the grandeur of philosophy. Which should we choose as the way? The inner way. Which should we not neglect in pursuing that way? The outer way. Because one without the other is meaningless. So this is the message of my master. Pursue both with equal ardor, with equal attention. Don't exaggerate one for the sake of the other. And then you will come to that ultimate conception of God, that on one side He is nothing or nothingness, and on the other side He is the universe itself. Now, how do we come out to this search? Again, it depends on us. It cannot be denied that perhaps 1 in a million comes out of happiness and joy, and even less than 1 in a million, 1 in a 10 millions of human beings comes to this search through the way of happiness, joy, health, wealth, success, things like that. Only 1 in so many billions comes to this way of searching for God by the way of happiness and health and success. All the other billions come through frustrations, sorrow, misery, disease, failure, So if my sister, what she said is correct, she is very lucky that she came from a well-adjusted, well-fitted background. She is one of the few, and that is something we should all do. But it is the way of success and joy and richness and health that we become arrogant, proud of ourselves. I am rich, I am great, I am happy, I am intellectual, I am wise. The I, it's deepening itself. Then where are you going to look for Him? It becomes like the narcissistic love of psychology, looking at your own face in the mirror and falling in love with it. There is no lover in your life, and ultimately it is suicide. There was this great saint and mystic Kabir, for whom Babuji had the highest praise. Kabir said, "We all think of God when we are miserable and sick. Who thinks of God when he is happy and healthy and living well?" Then he goes on to say, if we would only think of God when we are happy and well and living nicely, why should we ever have sickness and misery? Now, why do I mention this particular couplet of Kabir? There is a very important reason. Kabir did not ask us to renounce health and happiness and wealth and knowledge. He did not. He only said, think of God too when you are having all these things. He could not put it perhaps as beautifully as Babuji did. He did not have the spiritual approach for it. But yet the seed of the spiritual wisdom was there in him too. It was in a sense a negation of the earlier traditions of India that we should embrace misery and sickness and crudely burn our bodies, stick knives into our bodies, seek pain, seek troubles, because Kabir perhaps appreciated that even in pain I think only of myself, my headache, my stomachache, my heartache, my back pain. I am still I. And he said, so the ancient traditions made the mistake of seeking pain. The Western tradition makes the mistake of seeking pleasure. In between comes Babuji and says, don't seek either, be balanced. Take this when it comes, take that when it comes, thinking of God all the time. Because where there is pleasure, there must be pain. They are two sides of the coin. If you take a coin because the head of the coin is beautiful, the other side is there also. You cannot say, take this away and give me only the head. And another person says, no, I will have the tail side. I don't like the head of the coin. He cannot have it without this. So my master said, forget both. Happiness and pain or disease or misery are not things which we seek and find. They are things which happen to us. They happen to us. This is another thing which he made his own research and discovered that they happen to us because of our sanskaras. It's like a man traveling on a road. There is sometimes sunshine, sometimes there are clouds, sometimes it is raining, sometimes we have a nice road, sometimes it's a bad road. we don't seek these things. On the journey, what we seek is our destination. All the rest is incidental. Similarly, on our journey through life, Babuji says, seek the goal, forget everything else. So I hope you are able to appreciate what is fundamental, original and grand synthesis my master has made of life itself. It is only life. The search is not separate from the life. The search is part of the life. So when we think of how to lead life, the goal is there. The master is there. What we have to do is there. These are all parts of life. I wish to place this final conclusion of mine before you all, that only Sahaj Marg deals with life in a total way. Everything else has only dealt with the parts of our existence. Therefore, we say the Master is supreme and we have a supremely effective way offered to us. Thank you for listening. Here we conclude this first talk. In the next narration, we will cover the next talk titled Helping Means Changing. Thank you once again.